south of Scruffy.
I do tend to, go down certain rabbit holes that have to do with like current the political climate, which you may or may not want to include. I just actually, this morning wrote to a bunch of friends of mine who live in France, because I'm sure they're just, like
freaking out.
WTF,
Yeah. What's going on?
Are we recording?
Yeah.
And, I said, this is the perfect coda. I mean, this interview is happening 2 days or after just a nightmare situation. And,
Sure.
I think it's the perfect coda to, to a a malignant presidency that was enabled by, opportunistic politicians and opportunistic media. And, there's real grievances that we need to address. But, just the election of Trump alone should have opened people's eyes to that, should have given people the motivation to say, oh my God, what have we wrought? This is a symptom of something really bad happening, and we need to help people. We need to deal with, income inequality, which is growing, and how all of these people have been left behind, and, the opioid crisis. I mean, let's just go through the list,
Sure.
And not, just sort of look down our noses at, and think of them as just, redneck yahoos in the flyover states. And that's one of the things that's been interesting in my life is I have split my time and spent so much of my time in two radically different places. I still have an office in New York City, and I have an office in Knoxville. And so, while I am, clearly a member of the media elite, and I was raised in a very, insulated world outside of New York City, being in Knoxville has really opened my eyes to another part of the United States, which I really value and enjoy. So it's been an interesting bifurcated life I've had.
How did it happen that way? How did you end up? I mean, did you grow up in New York?
I grew up in the Garden State of New Jersey. About an hour, a little bit more than an hour outside of New York, in this kind of rural, very beautiful little area.
There's beautiful parts of New Jersey.
Actually, not far from Bedminster, which is
Gotcha.
Where Trump has his golf course. And I used to play hockey out at Far Hills, which is right around the corner from that golf course. So that's the world that I grew up in, and it was a bedroom community to New York. I ended up going to NYU.
Did you do the Tisch thing?
No, I didn't. I decided on a far more useful degree. I have a double major in French literature and philosophy, which my parents were thrilled about.
Well, your last name sounds French.
Yeah, but we're just American mutts. I mean, that family, DeBevoise, was a family that settled in Brooklyn in the 1600s, and so we have a long history of. I call ourselves, we're part of the tribe of lawn people who've lived in New Jersey for a bunch of generations.
Yeah, there's no Ellis Island to it. It was long before that, right?
Long before, yeah. But we settled and chose mowing lawns as our primary source of entertainment. But yeah. So I grew up in that area and lived in New York. Went to NYU, got that useless degree, and then I moved to Los Angeles, and that was really to live closer to my older sister, who had moved out there, and she had married this guy who is a documentary filmmaker by the name of Alex Gibney, who's now he's a actual national treasure of brilliant filmmaking, and he's done everything from Going Clear, the documentary HBO doc about Scientology, to his more recent stuff has focused on the COVID crisis. He's an amazing filmmaker. But anyway, so I went out to LA, ended up through pure serendipity, getting into the magazine business as a copy editor. In college, I'd worked as a proofreader at law firms to make money. This was a thing.
What do you read as a proofreader?
You read every document that a law firm produces. So New York has these huge blue chip firms that are responsible for defending, the likes of Union Carbide and and Big Pharma against class action suits. Right. And so this was predating, a lot of the sort. I mean, there were word processors. I mean, I'm almost 60 years old. There were word processors, but there were these rooms full of proofreaders and typists who would, physically read every document and mark them up for, whether there's typos or grammatical issues, and we were, reading everything from things about major mergers and acquisitions. In fact, every year there would be someone arrested for, using insider information to make money.
SEC violations.
Yeah. And then there were also, really horrendous things like I was working at a law firm called Dewey Ballantine that was defending Eli Lilly from a class action suit that had to do with DES, which was a drug that was used to prevent miscarriages that caused all kinds of horrendous, awful things to
women. With the
women.
kid or the mom?
Well, mostly the kid. And so, and I was reading this and I was just, absolutely, horrified. And here I was, helping this big company,
defend themselves.
But anyway, so I moved out to LA to be closer to my sister who was having a baby, and I had some other friends out there. And this is 1985. Drove across the country and found myself in this magazine business, and that's where I started hearing about this company called Whittle Communications, which was a company that surprisingly a lot of people in Knoxville no longer know about, because it was an amazing sort of force within the media industry, in that it created this special brand of magazine, and there were other media, these posters for targeted audiences, and they called it place-based media. And back in the day, the company was originally called 1330, and they managed to acquire Esquire magazine, and then sell it for bazillion dollars.
A little arbitrage for Whittle.
Yeah, exactly. So Chris and his former business partner Phil Moffitt split, and Chris Whittle started Whittle Communications, and it was sort of like a .com kind of vibe. And they brought people, creatives and marketing folks from New York and LA into Knoxville to work on a variety of different projects. And I was hired initially as an assistant editor to work on a publication that was a single sponsor magazine called Pursuits that was sponsored by Merrill Lynch. And it was basically about the avocations of rich overachievers, and so it had profiles of like one guy, Gil Kaplan, who had created Institutional Investor magazine and sold it for a ton of money. This guy, he decided to learn how to conduct Mahler's Second Symphony, which is like notoriously difficult, And he just applied himself to doing that. He wanted to do the definitive recording of this symphony. Someone who had absolutely no background
in music at all.
Yeah, but he's, you know, an arrogant entrepreneur, rich guy, and so we'd profile people like that. And
what was the name of the publication again?
Pursuits.
And so what? So a single sponsor publication. So it's Merrill Lynch sponsored Pursuits, and then it became.
And then it distributed it to its high net worth individuals.
Gotcha.
So I came into Knoxville having never been south of anywhere, south of DC. You know, and this is.
So Whittle was in L.A. as 1330.
No. Whittle was in Knoxville. So
okay,
they were recruiting
1330
people.
was two guys.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Whittle and the other guy, and then Chris
Phil
Whittle,
Moffitt.
and then Phil Moffitt, and then they split up.
Yep.
And Chris Whittle came to Knoxville.
No, so 1330 was always in Knoxville.
Ah, gotcha.
They had been. I think they went to UT together.
Gotcha.
And that's where they met. I mean, they were young,
now I'm with you.
aggressive entrepreneurs who wanted to create media targeted for people who were 13 to 30. That's where the name.
Interesting.
That was the demographic that they were going for. I think they had a college publication that they put out. Chris Whittle is an amazing entrepreneur. He's an amazing salesman. You know, anyone that you interview that's the first thing they'll say. The guy can sell snow to Eskimos, kind of thing. Super charismatic. And, you know, they built this thing and that was that people in New York and LA, in the publishing industry, in the media business, were talking about. It was growing quickly. He was raising a ton of money. He had built this thing called Special Reports, and then he built this thing called Channel One.
Channel One that was distributed to all the schools.
Yeah.
I remember it growing up.
Yeah. Well,
Lisa Ling.
Yep. Lisa Ling, Anderson Cooper.
Yeah. Was he on Channel One?
Yeah. Oh man. So anyway, that was all Chris Whittle's doing. I mean, he also hired a bunch of other, you know, really shrewd sales guys and came up with these wild ideas for sort of getting around the traditional media. Again, keep in mind this is pre-internet.
Right.
So he was coming up with niche specific audiences that he could reach in certain specific places. So for example, doctors' waiting rooms. He figured, you know, they figured through, you know, their research that in family practice offices, in pediatric offices, and, you know, XYZ offices, that there would be people sitting there waiting for their appointments for a specific period of time. And we're going to create a group of magazines called Special Reports. That group was headed by a guy named Keith Bellows, who had a tragic ending, but that's a different story. And we're going to, you know, they raised a ton of money to distribute these things and set up, you know, cases within doctors' offices, and build these absolutely stunning magazines that focused on Special Reports, health, Special Reports, entertainment, Special Reports, whatever it was. I can't remember exactly. So it was called place-based media. Channel One is effectively the same thing. It's only that it's TV that's beamed in. So you've got this audience that is essentially, you know, imprisoned in their schools, in their seats, captive audience, and we're going to beam them something useful, which is 10 minutes of daily news. It was less than that because that would include, and this was sort of the Trojan horse issue, 2 minutes of ads, you know, into public schools. And they sold that into 8,000 schools. And that meant wiring these schools with, you know,
putting a television in every classroom.
Every classroom.
Yeah.
And that was one of the selling points to these schools that were having budgetary issues. You know, they were going to get themselves their own, you know, TV system that they could pump their own programming into.
Right. And so Whittle did the infrastructure and all that kind of stuff?
Everything.
Installation?
And that was
Wow.
the field department was really, they were sort of the unsung heroes of this world, because, Chris and his marketing guys could sell, these brilliant ideas to marketers, and they would sell them into, like, for the high schools, it would be like Clearasil
Be Axe
and-
body spray now.
yeah, exactly. It's whatever,
Yeah.
for the poor sort of captive audience kids that they were selling to. So the company was growing leaps and bounds, but it was also, there was a huge amount of sort of hubris and miscalculation about spending, and so people don't realize that the court building downtown, that big beautiful brick court building, was the Whittle headquarters before it became the court building. And I'd read at the sort of as we were spiraling into oblivion, I was still working there. I'd read a quote, that's sort of the notion of hubris before nemesis. Hubris, someone had said that building an atrium building was always a sign that a company was going to go under.
Oh, yeah.
And this, to a certain extent, was that big, gorgeous building. It's
beautiful.
It's stunning.
Yeah.
And I had a big, beautiful office that,
How many people worked there?
at its peak, I think it was about 1,000 folks. Not downtown. I
Right.
mean, we like Channel One was produced by David Newman and his team.
Was that in
out of-
D.C.?
No, that was L.A.
Was it L.A.? Really?
It was L.A., but they had offices in D.C. and
Wow.
New York and
So then Whittle started as Just Print,
Just Print.
and then was Channel 1 and Channel 1 News and all that kind of stuff, was that the early days, the infancy of moving into other mediums?
So this was happening, in Knoxville, and I was working with my boss, Tom Lombardo, who's this incredibly wonderful guy who now really works as a poet. I mean,
Wow.
he ran a huge department within Whittle. Was a fantastic manager, great writer, and he, after Channel One's successful launch, they decided to create a Channel One for doctors called Medical News Network, and it was the same basic idea, except that the TV would sit on a doctor's, again, before internet,
Right. Before everybody's face was in their phone the whole time.
Exactly. So so there'd be this TV sitting on doctors' desks, where they could get both political news as well as health-related news. Doctors are inundated with magazines like New England Journal of Medicine and JAMA and all these and newspapers and the news in general sort of pick up on stories. One day, drinking wine is good for cholesterol. The next day it isn't. But also this was happening during Hillary Clinton's efforts to change the healthcare system.
As a first lady?
No. Yes, as a first lady. You're right. Sorry. Yeah. So there were these hearings. Doctors were freaking out, And so there was a great motivation for doctors to watch daily news for both those reasons. And so Whittle, shrewdly, he and a guy named Alan Greenberg shrewdly came up with this idea of Medical News Network. And Tom and I were responsible for creating the content.
Wow.
Well,
okay.
and really sort of like the content approach.
So was that your first foray into motion?
That's right.
Instead of
That's
print?
right.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
right. And that speaks to sort of my orientation in general to media tends to be kind of opportunistic and entrepreneurial. So we ended up hiring this wonderful MD named Nancy Snyderman, who was at NBC, and we worked with her to create the pilot, and then we marketed this to drug companies because they were going to be targeting
advertisers.
their advertisers. Yeah, and so we raised $100 million.
Wow.
And traveled around the world. At one point, I was going to be moving to London to launch Medical News Network International.
Wow.
And then it all just sort of fell apart. This sort of house of cards. Whittle was hemorrhaging money, and the launches weren't, bringing in. It's this sort of classic business mistakes.
Did Medical News Network ever happen?
It did as
Beyond the pilot?
There was a 5,000 doctor beta effort.
Okay, so you guys had,
and this is in the early '90s. I had an AOL account.
Yeah, dial up. So you guys were putting these televisions on doctors' desks,
but the key was also more Trojan horses here. The key was that there was also these keypads that doctors could use to take to because one of the other offerings of Medical News Network was not only the sort of news component, but also continuing medical education.
Oh, wow.
CME.
Wow.
Which is a corrupt was at the time.
Right.
It was a super corrupt world.
Insiders helping your buddies. You got to get the CEUs from this company.
You got to get CME credits. Yeah. Continuing medical education credits every year, and a lot of that the continuing medical education was coming from pharma that would do something on, say, I know this shit. I can't believe I still remember it, but BPH is an issue that it has to do with male prostate issues. Okay, so it's a benign prostate issue, and pharma was coming up with drugs to treat that.
Right.
Okay, and so inevitably there was a lot of CME oriented toward BPH.
Right.
Or we also targeted cardiologists, and so there would be a lot of things toward low in cholesterol. And
the doctors had to get these CMEs every year, right, or every 2 years to keep their license.
That's right.
And so they would use your machines.
They'd use these machines to do that, but then, of course, the pharmaceutical corporations were also shipping these doctors to Hawaii for their CME courses. And in fact, they were spending the entire time playing golf. And but here I was with my degree in philosophy and French literature and my background in creating media in whatever form. I had to become a certified provider of continuing medical education.
Really?
Yes.
To create the content?
To create this whole CME program.
Okay.
Because all of this content had to be certified. And so I was like a million miler on Delta, in the mid 90s because this is 93, 94, because I was traveling around putting together a consortium of universities to help us certify the CME and create these CME courses that were taken on this little keypad.
Right.
In addition, this little keypad enabled people to write scripts, so they could write their signature on this interactive keypad, which we co-developed with Philips, which is right around the corner.
Wow!
And doctors could get drug samples. I know.
So all of this, all of the creating the content that goes on the screen, creating the infrastructure that these doctors can get their CMEs on this new screen, was it all in the name of ad sales?
Of course.
All of it. All the Trojan horses you talked about.
Oh, of course. It was all
amazing.
No, we raised $100 million. We got $40 million from Merck. We got $40 million from Shearing Plow. We got $40 million from, well, maybe that's 120,000. 120 million. We got
20 more left.
Okay. Glaxo is in there. I mean, it was. Of course, that was the engine that drove Whittle, and
that's amazing.
That drives everything. Fox News. I mean, we're all shameless in our pursuits.
Well, it's interesting because the way to get the fight for eyeballs was more lopsided back then. It seemed like it's on the television. That's where it is. If you're watching a commercial,
Yeah.
Now there's a lot of different ways to get it.
That's right. There were very few gatekeepers at the time.
So you guys were being innovative and entrepreneurial in a way that you were creating a new
Platform
for
That's
people
right.
to get the eyeballs on it.
And then the content ultimately, and a lot of the folks that I worked with ended up working for, it's not MedNet, WebMD.
Oh yeah.
So I think WebMD ended up acquiring a lot of that content.
Really? All the
Because there was
courses
yeah,
you guys created that never really got deployed.
that's right.
Yeah.
And I I don't know. I mean, there was
It was liquidated when Whittle went away.
well then also Alan Greenberg, who was just this brilliant. Oh my God, seeing that guy sell. There was this we. And feel free to rein me in here.
No, I love it.
So, we had to go. Tom Lombardo and I had to go to France to sell Medical News Network to Merck International. Merck is huge pharmaceutical corporation. And we were going into, enemy territory. These people didn't want anything to do with Medical News Network. And so, Tom and I had put together our creative pitch. And Alan Greenberg and his team were doing the marketing pitch. And the morning of this pitch to all of the, sort of Merck Germany, Merck France, Merck England, just the whole this group of the heads of all of these divisions we were at this this incredible sort of golf chateau outside of Paris, and we were shuffled into we were meeting with these folks in a conference room. But prior to this, that morning, we go and meet with Alan Greenberg. And see how his side of the pitch is going. And he is in his palatial, hotel room, he's he's wearing socks, and he's disheveled, and he was this really lanky, tall redhead, and we saw that he was like putting together the pitch that morning, and we're like, oh my God, we're fucked. Anyway, so. We walk into this pitch, and they've set up the room so that we were at this this row of seats facing, it must have been 20 of these angry, totally non-receptive pharmaceutical executives, and I watched Alan Greenberg, who was like this kind of oh shucks, we're just. From little old Tennessee, and watched him turn that room. It was amazing. And we walked out. They probably wrote us a check that day for $1 billion.
That's fantastic.
So anyway, that was working with guys like that. And
it sounds like you certainly had exposure to a lot of really good salesmen and a lot of really good entrepreneurs, a lot of really good ideas people.
And that's what excited me about the company is it really was kind of a crazy meritocracy. You weren't like plugged into a company and sort of like making your way up through the ranks. You were sort of like
everybody's idea mattered.
Yeah, if you showed the kind of chutzpah and that these guys had, that was celebrated. And I certainly had. If I didn't have the experience or the talent, I had the chutzpah.
There you go. That can get you a long way. At least get you in the door.
I'm sitting here. Got me here.
Well, so you were there when the House of Cards came down?
Oh yeah.
And you had to do something, right?
Well, it was brilliant because we had like 6 months of doing jack shit,
Everybody could build their own businesses.
Tom became a poet.
Yeah.
Which was like, you're doing what? And it was during that time that a friend of mine, Doug Renfro, he had a media company in town called Radiant Media.
Yeah, I know that guy.
Crazy.
Also comes from a magazine background. I guess he was with you.
He was at Whittle.
It's all making sense. It's all coming together.
It's a tiny little world.
Yeah.
So Doug had been hired by this guy that I'd never heard of named Ross Bagwell to be like, I guess, the head of creative. And Doug said,
Cinetel?
no. Ross had just sold his company, Cinetel, to Scripps to launch HGTV.
Okay.
And had taken his suitcase of money and immediately opened up another production company, much to Ken Lo's horror.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Called Ross Television.
Okay.
Ross TV.
So the Ross Bagwell arc has not really been realized on this podcast before, but it's extremely important to.
He's the guy.
He's the reason, right?
He's the reason why there are all these producers. I mean, Whittle. There was immediately after Whittle, imploded. There was this diaspora of all the creatives that came in. I mean, at its peak, there were like 250 of us from New York and LA who had created what, we sort of saw as like the British Raj in Knoxville. It was like, I sound like such an asshole for saying that, but really we came in, we were like, what is this fucking place? And we were all hanging out together. We were all having our relationships together. There were a ton of Whittle marriages. And they all, everyone, bought homes in the same neighborhoods, and created this like weird Whittle real estate bubble, and also, funded Bennett Gallery. Bennett Gallery would not exist were it not for
That's
Whittle.
awesome.
So it's just awful, bougie bullshit. Anyway, this was all happening while Ross Bagwell was creating his factory for the early days of cable. So the early days of cable, Ross Bagwell figured out needed a shitload of programming to fill black. There's all this airtime, and they didn't have a ton of money. And so Ross, in his shrewd way, moved from he had an ad agency. He created this production company with, some other local folks and his son Ross. And it was called Cinetel. Hired a brilliant marketing kid named Stephen Land. And they started selling shows to, some of Ross's friends who had just started TNN. And out of Nashville. And then there were these, these fledgling networks like Discovery and A&E and
small cable networks at the time.
Tiny cable networks. There was and Ross and Steven, just talk about, gumption and ambition. They started just selling, and brilliantly, Ross held on to much of the rights to these shows. He owned them because he'd go in and say, I'll finance them,
right?
And knew
even for these networks that he was creating the programming for. He would pay
Discovery, TLC, it was all this like daytime, stuff that he was doing, like. Home makeover stuff for I don't know some of the other earlier stuff he did for Discovery.
But why Knoxville? Why just because of this one guy, Ross Bagwell?
So Ross. I mean, you really need to get Stephen Land in here, but because
I'd love to.
Ross had gone to New York. He was born and raised in McMinnville, outside of Knoxville. McMinnville, and from a not like a working class family, and he one day saw a television, and this is Ross mythologizing. He one day saw a television at a gas station, and he's like, I have to do that, and so he packed up his family, Sue Bagwell, and I think they already had. If not Junior, which is what they used to call Ross Jr., but also D, who's a Haslam, Haslam. They packed up and moved to New York, where he was a page at NBC.
Wow.
And from there, he worked with the amazing folks there. He worked at he was an associate producer on Howdy Doody.
Really? So he
But
worked his way up a little bit.
Worked his way
the
up.
page desk.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then he his wife Sue, whose family's from here, was like, get me back to Knoxville or I'm going to leave you. And so of course he would never, that he wouldn't allow that. So he moved back to Knoxville and he started an ad agency in Knoxville.
So Cinetel was an ad agency, not just a production
I don't think he called
company?
it Cinetel. It was an ad agency prior.
And then he started doing an in-house kind of production arm, and it just kind of
Became Cinetel.
one thing led to another?
And he really just sort of figured out that, he used to have all kinds of wonderfully inspiring quotes from Ross Bagwell, the Ross Bagwell aphorisms. One was, "Don't fall in love with it." And the other one was, "Flush it."
Really?
Yeah, because it was just like, this
terrible?
is just, no, it was just stuff. It was just stuff to put on the air. It was like,
I
this is
see.
not, it
don't
wasn't
get attached.
art. It was TV stuff to fill the air times of these cable networks. And,
I heard that he affectionately referred to Cinetel as the Kmart of
he didn't give
of cable television, and
you
that was
know.
before Kmart had such a good reputation.
No, he had the Club Dance, which was this.
Yeah,
I mean, he started selling stuff, swag,
just selling it.
selling crap at club because they had hundreds of people come to Cinetel, to their studio to do their line dancing, and that he was filming and just cranking out gobs and gobs and gobs of TV for TNN. And he would set up a booth and sell crap. And he was like, if I could get $1 from every one of these, he had absolutely no compunction, no respect for, the people who were watching this stuff,
Right.
Like he used to say, it was like, I sell this crap. I don't buy it. That was his attitude. I mean, he was, and he was an incredible self-made man. And going from Whittle, which was really just sort of a weird kind of subculture of, East and West Coast folks in Knoxville, into Ross's world was a tremendous sort of eye opener for me, and it was a cultural shock. Because Ross really sort of had created this very strange world, and his son Ross Jr., who was sort of a tragic figure, was sort of it was I don't know if I want to go into too much detail, but it was strange. It was a really strange little world.
So your time coming together with Ross Bagwell was after the acquisition by HGTV. Ken Lowe had moved HGTV to Knoxville, I guess.
No, it did not exist.
It didn't exist.
No,
he created
hired
it here, but
he
Scripps
hired.
was in Cincinnati, right?
Scripps was in Cincinnati,
and then they moved it down here more as a print outfit, right, or a radio outfit.
No,
is that not right?
No. I think Ross had built this structure out there, which now is multiple times.
So Ross
bigger.
built that. That was Cinetel.
There was a small portion of what you're seeing out there in that campus
next to Dead Horse. You see it from the interstate.
Yep. So Ross had built, but it was a substantial building, and he was cranking out 400 episodes of stuff a year. I mean, he was really just
so. It was the studios.
Studios, and he had built. He had he had another studio that he was doing car fix-up shows, and this was also, they had sold a series to Nickelodeon called Hey Dude, which was
which was awesome.
Yeah, I mean that was
it was big. That was huge when I was a kid.
That was Cinetel.
It's amazing. I had no idea.
Yeah,
it was being produced 5 miles from my house.
Yeah,
So
that he built that thing, and people started noticing it. So I think at one point, I guess he'd put the word out that he was available for sale, and HBO at one point was interested. There were other companies that were interested, and Scripps ended up buying it for a lot of money, and that included their library and their structure, and that was to launch HGTV, which was Ken's brainchild.
So they purchased all the infrastructure to create their own network.
That's right. That's right. And they hired Burton Jablin and Ed Spray and Ken had a boss named Frank Gardner, who was an amazing guy. So we worked closely with them on some of their early series for HGTV. At Ross, and that was my first foray into sort of traditional TV media production.
Was Dee working at Ross too?
Dee was, until I was like heading out the door, Dee's name never came up.
She wasn't in the business.
No.
Okay.
No. She had been involved in like helping sort of choose furniture. Yeah, things like that.
A designer.
She was a designer.
Okay. So you left Ross TV. What year are we at now?
So after 3 years of Ross and 6 years of Whittle, I'd now been in Knoxville for 9 years, and I was really sort of desperate to get back to my people in New York.
Yeah.
And sort of. And that's how I.
You lived a third of your life in this town you never even knew existed.
Yeah, no. So I met my wife at Whittle and my then wife at Whittle and had a baby, Simon, who was 2 at this point. And I just I went into Ross and I said I got to get back to New York. I'm out of here. And Ross, generously said, well, I'll set you up, with a Ross TV office. And so I found a tiny office right behind the Flatiron.
Okay. So in Manhattan?
Yeah, it was a tiny office. It was like the size of this room, And so I started selling shows up there, and that was my job. I was sort of inadequately replacing Stephen Land, who was really is way better at selling TV shows than I am. I was selling TV shows for Ross then out of New York. I didn't have an assistant. I would go into my office. I bought a house in Chatham, New Jersey, where I installed my family, and I was commuting in every day, the man in the gray flannel suit, and I started living that life, which I do love New York, and then toward the end of it, I just needed to get away from Ross. And this was during the early stages of the .com bubble. Mm-hmm. So 98, 99, I started developing ideas for a .com. And I was still working at Ross.
Okay.
So I found a business partner, and I went out and raised $1.5 million in an angel round for a .com, which we called the Relationship Network. It was called Love Track, and it was a continuum where you could go and you could click on where you were on the relationship continuum, pre-relationship, in a relationship, and you could get products and services related to that stage of relationship. And we hit up friends and family. We hit up small venture groups and raised $1.5 million. And I then quit Ross.
Yeah, that's good. You need to know where you land before you're going to land before you jump.
Well, this was kind of shameless. I at one point I had I think 11 people working for me in this tiny office
at Ross.
And Ross would call and I would tell everyone to shh. Everyone be quiet. I got my boss is
my boss is They're like, you are the boss. No, it's another deal.
No. And so I did that. And so I then quit Ross and I rented a space on 26th Street between 6th and Broadway, and I launched this .com, and burned through that investment, $1.5 million in 10 months. And a week after, this is now 2000, a week after that we burned through that, I started NorthSouth.
Okay. In New York?
In New York, yeah.
In 2000?
Yeah, no, I'd in 2000, yeah. I called up a friend of mine, Mark Hickman, who...
Was he a Whittle guy too?
No, he was a Ross guy.
Okay.
I had actually hired him to be a supervising producer over a series that we were doing for TNN. And, I saw how hard he worked, and he was just, he was a great producer. And he'd worked at a small ad agency called Roland Productions.
Old Tommy Roland. So he came from Roland to you?
Roland to Ross. And then he, and so I was up in New York, my orientation in this world, in media world and TV production, is more toward development and selling than it is toward production, and the sort of the nuts and bolts of production. So, Mark, had a lot more experience in that. He was also more sort of an operations guy. So I called him. I said, hey, you want to sort of leave Ross and start a company together, which we did. We didn't have a name yet, but we were like, well, what do we call this thing? And NorthSouth kind of made a lot of sense.
You're up there?
Because Mark was down here, and I was up there. I was the, as Ross used to call people who lived north of the Macon-Dixon line, fucking Yankees.
I like
Ross
it.
Bagwell, fucking Yankees. And so I was a fucking Yankee, and Mark was down here. And Mark really wasn't fully committed to doing that, but we did it anyway. And,
wasn't committed to doing the company with you?
Yeah.
Really?
And so the first year though, we sold 5 hours to the Travel Channel about Miami.
Nice.
And so we went down to Miami in January and February, and I was like, what is this place?
I could do this.
I love this place. People are so beautiful. So we sold those 5 hours to a friend of ours at Travel Channel, Doug DePriest. And then the next year, we sold 11 hours on the Caribbean. Spent 3 months traveling around the Caribbean. That was year 2 of NorthSouth.
By now, I think Mark is starting to be okay with this gig.
Mark is totally cool with it.
Yeah.
And we opened a little, we rented a place down in Miami. We're like, we need to commit ourselves to being down here every winter.
Yeah.
And so that was year 2. Year 3, we had 94 hours of programming. And so it sort of took off.
Right.
We were doing home makeover shows. We were sort of following the, weirdly enough, Ross TV and Mark had spearheaded this, were producing the first season of Trading Spaces.
Really?
Yeah. And so Trading Spaces was blowing up.
Was that with Ty? What's his name?
Yeah. I mean, Mark had largely cast that show.
I worked with him on Extreme Makeover Home Edition years later, probably 2008, something like that.
Lee Seaman, did you work with Lee back then? No? Oh, okay.
I got the job through a post supervisor in L.A.
Yeah.
But I always heard that he was found here, that Ty, what's his last name?
Pennington,
yeah, was found here. Mark Hickman cast him.
Yeah, yeah. Mark Hickman, my North-South partner.
So you would sell the shows, and then now it's Mark's problem.
Mark and I would sell together, but eventually, I mean, so we launched this business, we grew it together, we set up different worlds for each other. I think that was we each had our own sandbox, and North was we had an office at 26th and Broadway for 1140 Broadway for a long time, and then we built this huge space in the financial district, and so the north portion definitely was sort of growing and expanding, and that was sort of my little fiefdom, and
Yeah. Mark
Mark had his fiefdom down here, and we sort of outgrew the partnership, but somewhere in there, we started producing a lot of different shows. We produced, home makeover shows. We sort of rolled with the reality, sort of trends.
Right.
I was always sort of drawn to dark documentaries, and I'd done that at Ross. I developed, sold, and produced a show called The Human Canvas, which was about tattooing, and that was the early stages
Right.
of that world. That was predating the whole sort of tattoo parlor.
And before it was cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so we, I think, sort of making the sort of the leap from Whittle, my experience at Whittle, to having a production company, again, was sort of opportunistic.
Right.
We'd go to these network brands, whether it was Discovery, History, HGTV, Travel, yada yada, and that those brands, those cable networks, sort of defined what you pitched. It wasn't like the world is now, where you develop ideas and sort of you do it, for whether it's the streamers or even for the networks. You develop what you want to develop. I develop what I want to develop,
Right.
And pitch that, as opposed to the old days where really the sort of
It was relationship based.
It was
You
very
had a relationship based. You had a
Absolutely.
relationship, and so you created or you developed content that would put you
That's right.
that would well align you with that
that's
relationship.
Right. I mean, we were sort of an extension of these network brands.
I feel like that's what the Jupiter thing has kind of done. Is they have
Totally.
they have relationships with true crime TV partners, and so that's the content they make.
Yeah, and you learn how to do, and you become known for doing a certain type of programming. Of
Right.
course, over the years of North South, over the 20 years that I've had the company, we were known for doing, male skewing programming. We did a series for Discovery called Fight Quest, which was really very cool series about different types of martial arts. And we did, then we were also known for doing home makeover shows. We were known for, we did Wedding Story, and we did, Say Yes Atlanta. So we were known for doing female skewing programming. And so, we'd get pigeonholed, but then we'd break out of that.
Right.
And so sort of our big breakthrough into another genre was Impractical Jokers, which was developed by my then he's sort of VP of development, a guy by the name of James Murray, who is one of the Tenderloins, one of the Jokers, aka Murr. He was a development guy for me for
Really?
years prior to developing. He was always developing shows that he would be in.
Is he a failed actor like me?
No, the Tenderloins had it was an improv troupe that they started in high school. They
Awesome.
went to the same parochial Catholic school together.
Where at?
Staten Island.
Okay.
Their story is pretty, that's pretty, people who are fans of the Jokers know their backstory pretty well.
Is that the biggest boon you guys have kind of had?
Oh yeah, seeing that show become really sort of it's, as we like to say in the business, a genre buster.
Yeah.
There's really no other comedic hidden camera show that's done as well, and the guys themselves have become huge, huge celebrities. They're not Brad Pitt, but they
Right.
have a massive national following.
It's huge. We have this joke at Pop Fizz. We always love when we're watching Impractical Jokers, because that means we're traveling and it's on in every single hotel room at right before dinner.
On the Impractical Jokers network, aka truTV.
Yes.
Oh, it's unreal.
It's amazing.
I know.
And that's got to be, is that their biggest show?
Oh, it was the show that
Got them on the map.
True was, I mean, they were doing stuff like, what was that tow truck show?
Ice Road Truckers?
No. That was history. They had some really, really shitty reality series, and that were, like hardcore Pawn, and I mean they were just basically ripping off formats from other, like Pawn Stars became Hardcore Pawn, which is basically just like a cheapened version of Pawn Stars, and that sort of served them. And then, Marissa Ronca, who was she was head of development at that time. She, met with the guys and heard the pitch, fell in love with it. And to their credit, Marissa and her boss, really rolled the dice on this show and sank I remember hearing, $16 million in promo on this unknown series that, in its first season took off.
How many seasons are you now?
We're producing our 9th season right now.
900s already. Seems like it's like, I don't know, man. Seems like yesterday the show
came
out. So, I mean, hidden camera shows, is that a genre? I mean, I remember Punk'd, that was kind of a thing that did really well when Ashton Kutcher brought that thing out.
I think it's not like, murder porn is, like ID and that kind of programming is, or survival shows are a genre, home makeover shows are a genre.
I'm just trying to think if there's any other show in that format that I can really think of or put my finger on, either before or after. I
mean, it's, I guess the technology of hidden camera is used at different ends. There was that To Catch a Predator kind of stuff, so you're right. I mean, people came to us with the success of Jokers. Everyone wanted their Jokers. I mean, and this is how the lemming aspect of our industry, which the people are just like,
let's do that.
We want that.
Yeah.
I think that's going to work for us because it's a hit, And that Mark and I used to joke that, what is our business strategy? Our business strategy is to create a hit. Mm-hmm. Because that is the game changer for a production company. I mean, we were very successful at hitting, singles and doubles, but we never had a hit until Jokers. And then once you have that, everyone's coming to you saying like, okay, we want our Impractical Jokers. Needless to say, it's lightning in a bottle. I mean, those 4 guys are incredible. They're greater, than the sum of the parts. I mean, the sum of the parts is greater, whatever the expression is.
Greater than the sum of their parts.
Thank you. Yeah. But they are incredible, and they're incredible guys. I love them as friends and as colleagues. But the idea of creating another Impractical Jokers or something like it is just, it's foolhardy.
Yeah. Can't be recreated.
No.
Did it open a lot of doors when you had the cachet behind that show?
I think what it does, having a hit show for a production company, what it does is it stabilizes you. You're not staring down the barrel of financial ruin all the time.
Right.
And so it emboldens you. And so I feel like it's helped me guide my development team, Brad Kohlenstein and his group and my company in general, toward doing the kind of shows that we want to do, toward, I started a sort of high-end doc division called NoSo Films, which is stuff that I want to, focus on.
Right. And you can play a little bit. Right?
Absolutely. Because now I'm looking at, I mean, typically come January, I'd be looking at my cash flow drying up in June, say, if I'm lucky, you know.
Your runways.
And so I'm just like,
shorter.
Oh yeah, no, and that goes, I mean, the how long it takes to develop a TV show, and to get it on the air and get through the whole bullshit, development process to,
it's years, right?
It is. Oh, it's crazy. I mean, we've got a show. In fact, we developed a show that our friends at Pop Fizz came to us with Lil Jon.
Yeah, I shot part of the pilot.
Oh, that's
down
great.
There.
Yeah. So
in Atlanta with Anitra.
And that's been a year and a half in the making.
It was the sizzle we shot, not the pilot.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was at least a year. It was a year and a half ago.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts.
So, it just takes forever and having, especially, and it's getting worse and worse. And so unless you have that kind of financial stability as a company, it's very hard. I don't recommend anyone start a production company right now.
Yeah, or ever.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, one of your Tenderloin guys can get Me Too'd, and the whole thing comes down.
Shh.
Right?
Oh my God, I can't believe you just said that.
But I mean, I'm just.
Oh my God.
I'm just saying,
No,
as
you're
hard
right,
as it
you're
is
right,
to
you're right.
build, like you're subject to cancel culture now.
Yep.
Which is scary.
And that's one of the weird benefits of having a show that's completely apolitical. And the guys are completely apolitical.
Good.
They're just not. I mean, they if I was hosting a show, I'd be fucked.
I know. Me too. I couldn't go out in public.
I mean, my opinions, my political opinions are way too strong. And
So you've got some squeaky clean guys that are good, that you feel good about having, not being liabilities to the shows.
I wouldn't. They're not squeaky clean at all.
Okay.
Not at all. I mean, oh my God. I mean, they're real people. But I think, they have a live show, and I think they appeal to people because they're not political. There's nothing. There's no hint of it.
Right.
They're real. Their relationship is real. They're funny as shit. But there's nothing. People can escape from the political maelstrom that we live in to Impractical Jokers and just sort of live there.
It's awesome. Well, what's coming up?
We have a limited series about a tantric sex cult. Always a good combination of things, right?
We were talking about Rebecca Ridner that came over. Mm-hmm. That was on the podcast.
Is she in a tantric sex cult?
No, it was just a regular cult. But people ate that episode up, man. I'm still getting. People love cults.
No, I love Rebecca, and if you're listening to this, Rebecca, I can tell you're cult prone.
She's impervious to cults now.
We'll see about that. Anyway, we have that. We have another pitch that's going out that is about unsolved trans murders. That's called The Names, which is really powerful.
Wow.
That's NoSo Films. We're also
that sounds like the darker stuff you were talking about that you gravitate towards.
It is. We also have several great projects with our friends at HGTV.
Great.
On the other end of the, from the sublime to the ridiculous, the other end of the cultural spectrum.
Sure.
What else? And then we have another series. We have a bunch of stuff that sort of spins off of Jokers. And I know I'm spacing out a bunch of things, but
it takes the shotgun method.
We have another. Oh my God, we have. Yeah, it does. And I've always been a big fan of diversification in our programming, in part because I am I'm just a creature of media. I love characters. I love unusual worlds. And so that can take me toward, this crazy, hysterical Instagram star that we work with named Amber Wagner. Just Living, baby. Look her up.
Okay.
So
Just Living? Just Living?
Yeah, we got a show with her on Peacock that's going to be coming up too.
So OTT, not linear. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Brave New World.
And the cult series is for Discovery Plus. So
I'm glad you're getting in on that.
Yeah.
While it's happening.
Yep.
That sounds like it's going to be a really cool platform.
It's inevitable. I mean, you have to.
Yeah. So you're going to hang around in the business for a while, you think? Or, I mean, it sounds like you're just doing what you love now.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean,
You're not going to be a poet.
Did I mention that I'm almost 60? I have a 2-year-old.
Oh yeah, that's
So
crazy.
I have an amazing spouse, Celia Winchester, who has an accounting firm in Knoxville that does accounting and CFO work for production companies.
I think we're maybe about to be working with Celia.
Amazingly brilliant woman.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, I can't believe she married me, frankly.
You married up too, huh?
I totally married up.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And we have a baby together. And she
A 2-year-old.
She has two teens, and I have a 25 and a 23-year-old.
So you have a house full. Well,
We have decades of kids.
Decades of children. Does that not scare you? Like I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and to press the reset button right now completely terrifies me.
No.
You've done it.
You've done it. I'm in a different stage of life. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in this place, and the pandemic has been this incredible, I hate to say it, but a gift in that I spent so much time at home with this baby, and I was building NorthSouth with my two older kids and Simon and Nemo, and it was it was not easy. I mean, it was not easy for my ex and not easy for the kids, and
Right.
it was super stressful, and now I'm more comfortable, and like I said, I've built this business that works well on its own, and so it affords me more time to be with the kids. And I can't go to New York. I used to be going to New York every other week, and now I haven't been there since March. I gave up my apartment up there.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I bet that was tough.
It was. Goodness.
Okay.
It's spam risk from Hawthorne, New Jersey. See, New Jersey.
See, that potential spam is the one that always hits me up. Yeah.
It's been really amazing being with this baby and how much the other kids love the baby. And
That's great.
And I also mountain bike constantly.
I noticed you had a rack on your car of some sort. I didn't know if it was skis or a mountain bike. I couldn't tell. It was.
I mountain bike several times a week.
It's awesome.
Knoxville.
I've heard we've got some good stuff around
incredible
here.
stuff. Yeah. So that's where a lot of my risk tendencies are now toward that kind of self-harm.
Yeah.
Not so much
like
financial self-harm, but physical self. I was also developing a show. This was at the same time. This predated Jersey Shore, so I was, there were networks that were asking for shows that were take place on Jersey Shore. This was before that series, so in order to get access to some of the clubs down there, I worked through a guy who was a made member of the mob, and he was also sort of loosely attached to this whole sort of other program I was working on. And so I visited, I drove along the Jersey Shore with a made guy, going to different clubs trying to get access. We didn't, but it was another, and there was a side tale, having to do with this guy that was in the car with me, whose father
side tale? Somebody was
well, there was
no.
I'm sorry. There's a tangent to this story,
Yeah, gotcha.
involving this made guy who, when we visited one town along the Jersey Shore, we went and talked to someone. He went in. He had to go in by himself because the guy he was talking to, his father had been killed by by this made guy's father. So and his father was away, quote unquote, for that purpose, for that reason.
Wow.
Oh no, it's just crazy. And this was during this period where my business partner was just like, "Will you stop? What's your problem? Why are you working with this element? And what is it doing for you?" And I was like, I don't know. I think maybe I should just mountain bike.
Well, it sounds like you've been put in some pretty tough situations or some pretty scary situations in the name of television.
I know. But and I should have just stuck with like making home makeover shows
Or what was the one I worked on? The first one right after I got out of school. I came to Knoxville, and you guys were filming an episode of something here. It was a pageant show.
Oh yeah.
Little Miss Perfect.
Little Miss Perfect. Yeah.
How'd that one do?
That show did well. We did
Good.
40 episodes of it.
Wow.
I mean, it was great. I liked it a lot more than Toddlers and Tiaras.
Yeah.
I mean, this world that I'm in, it really does. It's incestuous, and that's why you see
Right.
a lot of the same types of shows because
The Lemmings you mentioned.
yeah, I mean, we predated Toddlers and Tiaras, but Toddlers and Tiaras did a lot better, and that was produced by some friends of mine out of L.A.
Any hard feelings when stuff like that happens? When they take a format
No,
similar, an
no,
idea?
because we've benefited from that as well. I mean,
Good.
It's
Builds a genre that you have a back catalog for.
I mean, we produced a show called In a Fix. We did 90 episodes, hour-long episodes of a home makeover show for TLC that I still love. That was virtual ripoff of another show, and the network came to us, and we were like, okay,
Yeah.
we'll do it.
Everybody does it. Why not?
That again, back to producing something like Impractical Jokers, which really is one of the few examples of a labor of love, a show that has such goodwill, that is an incredible. I mean, the number of stories I get of people who have an ailing child who loves the show, and
Right.
I have people friends of mine, network executives, call me and say, "Hey, my son's bar mitzvah is coming up, and could you get Joe to do something?" And I'll do,
cameo for
and
him.
I'll get Joe to send me
That's great.
some little message to
Yeah.
little Johnny who's having his bar mitzvah.
That is cool to have something that you love, something that the people love, something that you enjoy working
That
on.
has done wonders for my company.
And, exactly.
Yeah.
And it almost, I don't know if it completely combats the we're whores gentlemen mentality, but it is
Ross.
a nice.
Well, Ross, I mean, I cut my teeth with a guy who really was just, he just wanted to make money. He didn't give a shit. And that my background, because, I do consider myself a weird blend of entrepreneur and creative. I managed to create a company that does value creativity, and yet also survives.
That's all you can ask for.
Yeah.
Anything else, Charlie? I mean, we could sit here for hours,
I
but
know.
did we miss anything? Anything big?
No, you've got my entire
story right here in an hour and 20 minutes.
Again, I love that you're doing this.
Thank you.
I love seeing how the creative community has evolved in Knoxville, and I'm sure there's going to be a whole new wave of different folks creating companies and doing cool things. And
well, you helped build us, so we need to know where we came from. We need to know our history.
And I tip my hat to Ross. I tip my hat to Stephen Land and other folks that really, and there's a very positive, group of supportive folks in this. And I urge anyone who wants to get into the business to reach out to me. And I'll see if I can connect you with other folks. So
It's awesome.
nice talking to you.
Charlie, thanks a lot for being here, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. Me too.
Thanks, man.